Well, hello, everyone. We have a really interesting topic today, which was posed to me by our guest, Anne Ryan. Anne, raise your hand, say goodbye, or goodbye, say hello.
Hello.
Anne, by the way, is one of our seasoned practitioners. She's a member of our optimal EFT, membership, the advanced training, and so on. She has this interesting question: why do we give our power away when we have the unseen therapist? Now, we're going to discuss that a little bit, but that's a really interesting question because the more you get involved with, the more you engage with and understand the unseen therapist, the more power, the more trust you start having her, and the more wisdom you see. And so the question is, why do we go someplace else for wisdom? I guess that's your question, isn't it, Anne?
That's the question. It's something I've been reflecting on for the last little while, Gary.
And so
Yeah.
why do you reflect on it? How did that show up?
The way the question showed up initially was like, why do we defer to others when we've access to such wisdom ourselves, which is another way of saying what you said. Mm-hmm. And it came up in two ways. It came up in a session with somebody I was working with. And this person had read something in a book that said something about we can never be happy in our bodies. And I just, that had kind of taken that quite literally, as in, I can never be happy on this earth. And
this person was, this wisdom, you can never be happy in your body. Was they sort of a guru of some kind?
Yes. A very well-known person who writes and speaks and, absolutely. A very well-known name. And this one little piece had caught the attention of the person I was working with. And of course, there's a whole book and, sometimes we just see a little piece. But it really caused me to think, like, why, when we have the unseen therapist, when we can tune into that inner wisdom and kind of really check, well, is that true for me? Do I need to see it another way? Why do we take as, if you excuse the phrase, but as gospel, what those that we seem to often see as, well, they know more, or they're more experienced, or they're further along the route to, being enlightened in some way? Why we give away our power instead of checking in what is our own truth?
I'm gonna pose a guess to that. We give away our own power because we don't even really realize we have our own power.
Yes.
We're trying to get that power or get that wisdom from sources outside of ourselves. Here's a well-known author, says some good things. Another one says some good things. The two of them happen to conflict sometimes, but okay, that's how it goes. Okay. But then here's another, and here's another, and here's another. And I don't think that we trust yet that power within. And that's part of what our course is all about, our advanced course, trusting the unseen therapist. By the way, we have some essential links below this. It includes an intro ebook that I have called The Unseen Therapist. There's a newsletter and advanced training links and stuff like that. But putting that aside, even in our course that you're a member of, and I think one of our main goals in there is being able to listen to that powerful, the unseen therapist within, who's always there speaking, but we're not listening because we got too many ego things going on and chatter and blah, 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 blah. Does that fit? Or do you have any, you were talking about being not good enough or something like that, but
Yeah, it's like, why is it we don't listen? Okay, so obviously when we're starting off doing all of this, it's like, well, people might say, I don't even hear. How do I know it's not just my voice making this up? So, okay, there's all of that to kind of get through. And at the same time, that inner wisdom is that whether it's a nudge, it's a like, in our head we hear it, or we get a sense of it, or whatever. Like, it is always there. And I, having thought about, like, well, why don't we? Because it would seem so obvious, and yet a lot of the time we don't do it. I think it boils down to some version of I'm not good enough. Probably most of humanity at some level, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm not lovable. But the I'm not good enough bit is like, well, if somebody who's written, a New York Times bestseller says it, well, they must know more than I do. Like,
they must be good enough.
Absolutely, they must be better than me, at least.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think that's the kernel. We doubt ourselves. We don't, like, what would we know? Like, who am I to think I hear the voice of the unseen therapist? Like, those kind of things. And yet, what is right for one person, and look, isn't it great there are books? Because sometimes people will get something from one of these books that is really life-changing. And at the same time, sometimes we can take a sentence or a chapter very literally. And maybe that's not how it was meant in the whole context. And it can put us down a path that's not correct for us.
Yeah. I think a good example of that is, for years, as we were doing EFT tapping before unseen therapist comes along, we would use what we call detective work with a client to discern what's the real core issue here. I mean, what's really going on, and what's the cause of this, whatever the issue may be, but the real cause. Okay. And so we'll ask a lot of questions. When did it first start? And with a lot of questioning and digging, we can often find the cause, but it takes a lot of questioning and digging. And sometimes that takes weeks or months. Mm-hmm. And there are occasions when you don't even find it. Okay. But if we learn how to listen to the unseen therapist, we can ask the unseen therapist, what's really going on here? Mm-hmm. And if we've learned to listen, we'll get it in an instant. We'll get a nudge. We'll get an image. We'll get a thought, a phrase, a something or other. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've told this story before, but I remember working surrogately with a mother, she's one of our members, for her son who was taking some rather dangerous drugs for acne. And try as we may, we really couldn't find the core issue. I ask unseen therapist, and I get the notion broken toys. Now, this is a 20-year-old kid in college. I mean, what does broken toys have to do with anything? Okay. And this is a wisdom you wouldn't get out of some guru's book. It wouldn't happen. Okay. But as it turns out, broken toys was a big deal, because when this young man was a boy, his father would inappropriately threaten his son and take his love away from the boy if he didn't do things just the way the father wanted, including, I'll break your toys, which he did. Okay. Well, toys to a young boy are a source of love, and you break them. And so it was a father issue all this time. But how much time does that save? And how much more solid is that wisdom than to get a phrase out of a book, or hear a speech, or something from someone outside yourself, rather than what's inside yourself? And I think you're right, Ann, this thing about I'm not good enough. I mean, we are conditioned to be, at least in the Western cultures, not good enough, because we're always, aiming to get some trophy, to be better than, to win this, and, be at the top of that, and achieve. And of course, you can never be at the top of anything very long anyway.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts?
Well, we live in Western culture, generally a competitive world. So better, worse than, first, second, fifth, sixth. Like, we do live in a competitive world. Yeah.
And you're never good enough.
Until you believe you are. But yes, that's the work, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's the work.
Until you believe you are. And some trophy from outside, or some award from outside, it's just an award from outside.
Yes.
You're never
Absolutely.
really good enough until you understand you are inside, and therein lies the influence of the unseen therapist.
Yeah. And I think the other strand to this, besides, maybe we deferring to what we're calling here the gurus, or those who've written the books, or maybe who speak to large crowds in public, the other side is, our own, maybe growing up, our family, the social circle we're in, the whatever it might be, and all the shoulds that come with that. What you often call, Gary, people have their rule books, and it's polite to this, or when something happens, we do that. And again, some of those things are aligned with us and some of them aren't.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I mean, it's just a personal example recently, but sometimes when something is going on for somebody or a family, people will make casseroles and, bring them. And I mean, it's a really lovely community neighborly thing to do.
Sure.
For years and years and years, I would make my, paltry effort at doing such a thing if there was someone around me, something like that going on. And since I've started doing this more, connecting more with the unseen therapist, I have such a clear sense there are people who are really good at making casseroles and dropping them off to people's houses. I'm not one of them. However, I can quietly connect with the unseen therapist on behalf of whatever is going on, which is 10 times more aligned to me and my being than making a casserole that just, isn't aligned to my being, should we say. But it's a simple thing, but it is okay, the should is, we should all rally around. Absolutely, if that's what resonates, and it does for lots of people. And my path now is, okay, I'll connect with the unseen therapist. I'll do the piece that resonates for me, and it won't involve a casserole, I'm afraid.
I've got a story, you just trigger a story of my own, okay? I live way out in the country, and there's very few people around, but we do gather once in a while for a kind of a community potluck, if you will, something like bring your casserole, okay? And the general idea is, if you don't want to show up with a nothing thing, because that doesn't look good. I mean, what you bring has to be really good. I'm not a cook at all. I couldn't care less, okay? And so I was playing around with that thing in my mind. What do I bring? What do I bring? So I ask unseen therapists, and I immediately get, nobody's bringing a watermelon, which I did, and it was quite the hit. So anyway, okay. Anything else, Anne, before we draw the curtain here?
Just to finish with one thing, Gary. It's really short. In a session recently where there was this sense of deferring to the gurus, I mean, that mightn't have been the term, but the people who know so much, the unseen therapist message was, I just have to read it. It was, there are no shoulds, and we are the only guru of ourselves. And I thought that was I wrote it down to remember it, because it is so true. We are the best guru of ourselves once we tune in with her.
Yeah, that's how I got away with the watermelons.
Exactly.
Easy. Go to the store, buy a watermelon, show up. I brought a knife so they could cut it. Okay. All right. Okay, everybody. I hope you got, our audience, I hope you got a lot out of that. A lot of meat here. You might want to watch it again, because there's a lot of stuff that we talked about. So anyway, we'll see you next.